That is doing something. But for us, it's not, because we don't have the list. So it's very important for you to kind of start to manage yourself in a different way and look for these red flags that are coming up to say, how do you feel when you start doing things for yourself a lot? How do you feel when you start focusing more energy and time on doing stuff for yourself? How do you feel when you start not doing what you think you're supposed to be doing? What is the feeling that comes up? Because that feeling is going to be important, because that's going to be the thing that's going to keep dragging you back over to the other place where you don't want to be. So that's an important thing to do. But, like that woman asked me that question, how do I do it? It's not a how question. It's very easy to do it. Why are you choosing not to? See, it's not a question. It's a choice. See, we want to make it, see, because the question, basically, the reason you're asking me the question is, what do you want to do? You want to take the responsibility off yourself. How do I do it, as if I'm giving you an invention? You're going to ask me, how do I do it? How do we do what? There's nothing to do. You chose not to take time for yourself. Now you have to choose to take time for yourself. It's very simple, right? It's a simplistic thing, but we want to defer so somebody can tell us, give you permission to go do something for yourself. That sounds crazy, right? But how many of us were waiting for a parent to give us permission to do something for ourselves? Right? You go, Mom, I did all my work, I did everything, can I go out now? Well, you didn't do that. No. Almost. So, this is what's ingrained in us as far as what we're here to experience emotionally, but as we continue to hold ourselves in that negative cycle, we keep repeating that behavior over and over again because we don't see it the way we need to see it. We see it as, this is what I have to do, not this is what I'm choosing to do. So you've got to put yourself in a mode of choice, not in a mode of obligation. Because most people live in a mode of obligation. They don't live in a mode of choice. Now listen, we all have things to do. Do I feel like taking out garbage? No. Do I feel like picking up my dog stuff? No. Do I feel like sitting around and doing my QuickBooks once a month? Not exactly. But it's part of what I do, right? It's part of, we all have those little tasks that we have to do. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about, generally speaking, your choices are critically important. But you give away the power by thinking it's not a choice. And the reason you do that is very simple. And the reason you give away your power is you really want to be a victim. Anybody here? We all do it, right? We want to be a victim because it's easy to be a victim. I had a guy, actually on that same call, who asked the question, and he said, how do I overcome my procrastination? That was a good question. So I said, well, what is your problem? What is it that, so basically procrastination is based on fear and based on a feeling that you can't do something. I'm unworthy, I'm incompetent, I can't do it, or I'm afraid to do it because something bad's going to happen to me. So he said, well, what do I do? You have to do it. Go do it. See what happens. Right? But he wants me to give him a pass and say, well, it's not your fault. You're procrastinating because it's your choice to procrastinate. Everything is your choice. That is where, that's free will. That's the wild card for us, is free will. So every time, think about during the day, how many choices you make throughout the day. How many? Chose to come here. You didn't have to. Chose to get up and go to work. You chose everything. You chose to wear certain clothes. You chose to eat certain foods. I remember, I'll never forget, I think it was about 7, 8 years ago, I read an article, all these mothers got together. They wanted to sue Frito-Lay because they were selling food that was not healthy. Are you buying it? Are you giving it to your kid? Well, if you're buying it and giving it to your kid, why are you suing why is it not your responsibility to, God forbid, cook a meal? Right? Shouldn't you cook it? Maybe you could cook a meal one day and not go to have every night have your kid eat something with the logo on the bag. Maybe you could cook something. So, again, I want to see, so we like to give up the power. See, we like that because it allows us to stay victims, and most people love to be a victim because that's what you learned. You don't like it, but you learned it. This is learned, you learn to be a victim. So in your households, how many of you say you grew up in a household where the people were very victim-oriented, right? So that's what your life, you saw, that's what you learned. You learned to be a victim because that's what the people in your house were. And then you went out into the world, and anytime there was a problem, you slide back into that energy of being a victim. And you lose all your power in that energy. All your power goes away. Because you don't see yourself as having the power of choice. How many times a day do you say, I have to do this? Think about it. How many times a day do you say, I have to do this? So you want to catch yourself, because here's the key. You want to catch your words, whether they're coming out of your mouth or going through your head. So those words are coming through you all day. So you want to be very aware of that and say, ooh, I keep saying that. I keep saying I should, I have to. So you want to look for these little catchphrases that you use all the time. So as you start catching yourself, say, ooh, is that the choice I want to make right now? You know, that's why I always laugh at weight loss, because people say, how do I lose weight? This is not a big mystery. Right? This is not like, you know, solving, you know, this is not a big thing to solve. It's not that hard of a thing to figure out. It's not, and it's not, it's an emotional thing, right? It's not, we know what to do. Does anybody not know what to do? Right? You know what to do. You have to eat a certain way, and you have to have some physical activity. It's not that hard to figure out. So if you're not doing that, then there's an emotional issue that stops you from going forward. It's not that you don't want to and you're conscious. It's that you're emotionally, there's something inside of you that's stopping you from going forward. And that's happening for everything that we're trying to do. It's mentally you want to do something. So when we look at this going forward, basically you want to look at it as your conscious part of you is your awareness. So your conscious part of your brain says, ooh, I want to change this, or I want to make this change, or this is uncomfortable, or this is bothering me, and this is a problem. So the problem for us is, when we get into that consciousness and we say, oh, okay, I want to make this change, the first thing you do is what? You want to make a change. What's the first thing you do? Whatever it is, regardless of what it is. Weight loss, there's only a few things you want to change, right? It's health, it's relationships, it's career, it's money. It's pretty much the same thing. And relationships of any kind. So if you want to make a change in your life, and you decide to say, okay, I'm going to make this change, what's the first thing you do? What do you do?
Do the total opposite of what you were
do the opposite of whatever you were doing. That's a good one. But in your brain, what do you do first? Think about your brain. You want to make a change. You decide today you're going to get up. Today's going to be the day you're going to lose that weight. Today's going to be the day you're going to change your job. Today's going to be the day I'm going to write the book. I've been wanting to write a book. Do you know how many people I meet?
come up with an excuse not to.
Yeah, but what do you first do? Think about before that.
You make a plan.
You make a plan. Thank you very much, Marina. Right? Because that's your first thing to do. Your brain says, okay, I want to go from point A to point B. I need a plan. Which is fine to have a plan. But then, this is really where I really think it's important for us to make the transition. Because your conscious mind has done its job. It brought this into your awareness. You kind of brought it up into your consciousness where you say, ooh, I want to make this change. I want to lose weight. I want to make this change. I want to change my job. I want to make this change. I want to write my book that I've been wanting to do for so many years. I never did it. So at that point, you say, oh, I need to have a plan. I have the plan of what I'm going to do, and I'm going to plan it out, and then I'm going to do that. So now you have a plan, but how many people execute the plan? None. But mostly don't. Very few people execute the plan. Because that's really where you have to transition now, okay? Because it's almost like saying, it's like a relay race. Like your conscious mind did its job, it handed off the baton, and you have to say, okay, you're done. Now, emotionally, you have to understand what's stopping you from going forward. That's where you have to stop. And I think what ends up happening is people get trapped in cycles in their mind of trying to say, how do I do it? Trying to figure it out. Or they get cycled around into feeling upset. Oh, I'm trying to do, it's not working. You start bringing yourself back into critical self-talk, or you start bringing yourself back into those places. So what you've got to do is say, okay, hey, this is definitely something I want to do. How do I feel? How do I feel about this change? How do I feel about making this change now? That feeling is going to be the key to transition from the conscious part of your work, which is done now, into the next step. But most people get stuck in a cycle in their brain and continue to go wheel themselves and drive themselves crazy. I did it for many years. I went bankrupt twice doing that. Because I'm trying to say, figure it out. What did I do wrong? I'm not working hard enough. I'm not making the right decisions. I didn't read the right books. I didn't do the right... What did I do wrong? How many of you go into that? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? What did I do wrong? What mistakes did I make? How did I do it wrong? So now you've got to say, okay, this is what I want to do. I need to get into what it feels like. What's the feeling I'm holding on to now to make this transition across? And now here's what's going to happen. As you stop yourself here and start bringing yourself into your emotion, what'll happen is you'll start to realize what you're feeling and what's been stopping you. So your fear will come up. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Or what's bothering? What is it about making this change that's so hard for me? What is my emotional connection to making that change that I can't do it? That's what you have to understand. And what's unfortunate for us most of the time is we get stuck here and we don't transition out of here. The other thing that people do all the time, which you have to be really careful about, is you go in overdrive of research. Anybody do that? You're like the research machine. Anybody do that? Because your brain is saying, I must be missing some piece of information that I did not get. And I remember at one point doing this work, when I was working with my teacher a long time ago, and she said, don't read any more books. She said, because I used to read like a million books. My wife said, I had books everywhere. Every book that came out, I was reading everything. I had audios. And she said, stop. Because she said, you're done. And she said, are you learning anything? I said, well, it all starts to sound the same. Yes, that's it. It's done. You're done now. You've read all this stuff. You need to work on your feelings. You know what you need to know. And most people, you kind of have a good idea up here, but you need to get the teaching here now, the internal teaching, which is what your next level is. So that's another thing people, I was doing an event, I was speaking up in LA a couple of years back, and a guy came up to me and he bought everything I had. He was my best friend. And he bought every book, whatever I had, he bought down the bag and stuff. And he said to me, I go to 200 seminars a year. I said, oh my God. I said, what is that, your job? He was just like, but he was like an informationaholic. And he knew, he had so much information, he was like mind-boggling. And I have people come up to me at an event and say, do you know in that book, you wrote this on page, I was like, I don't know, I don't even know, I don't know that was like 5 years ago. But absorb all this information and you get caught up in this idea of, I'm missing information. So it's not, you get to a point where, not to say you can't always have more information, obviously, but especially if you're doing something new, but you have to understand that your block is not going to be information, it's going to be emotional. And I was doing a real estate group up in Fullerton earlier this year, and it was all mortgage guys and real estate people who had been in business a long time, and they were all, they'd all been in that area. They were all over 30, in their 30s and up, and they had all been. And I said, basically, all of you, if I spoke to each one of you individually, do you think the skill set level of this person and this person is that different? Probably not. What you know versus what you know is not that different. But the difference is the more successful person has different energy than the other person. But the skill set is probably about the same. So that's what we have to understand, that the bridge to cross over is the emotional bridge. It's not the mental bridge. But the mental is part of it because I need to get it into my consciousness so I understand that it exists. Oh, I'm aware of this, I know what it is, this is the change I want to make, it's here. But then you need to let it go and get into your feelings and start to understand, what am I feeling about this change? What am I afraid of? What is it about this change that is not resolved? Or I'm holding on to old feelings from when I was a kid. Old beliefs and feelings from your childhood, from your mother, from your father, these are things that you learned from growing up. That you have conflict and you have things unresolved about those feelings. So that ties us into dealing with going forward and also clearing karma, which really is what we want to do. So basically, when you look at your karma, everybody has karma. Every single person in the world. The difference is, some people have what I like to think of as heavy karma. So heavy karma means you have to deal with a lot of shit. Excuse my New York slang, but I have to put it out there. Other people have light karma, right? They got the light trip, so they didn't get all the hard stuff. They got the light version. So people, their lives are easier. Things seem to work out, and they don't have that many problems, and they got a couple of issues or obstacles. And other people have very heavy issues and problems, and they have to break through barriers and deal with a lot of emotion and deal with a lot of stuff and have conflict and heartache and all these things. So it's not a good or bad thing. It's just your karma is going to be different than somebody else. And it's not for you to judge it. I judged everybody. Anybody here very judgmental? I used to judge everybody all the time. So I'll never forget, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, my cousin calls me up. He lost his job. He was in banking. And he was a guy that, for all these years, and he's in his 40s already at this time, all these years, never had a problem with any job. He always went from one place to the next. You know, people that get downsized, this, that. One of those guys, just cruised through for 20-some odd years, always had a job, everything was great. So one day, when all this, whatever's going on, he loses his job. He called me up like somebody died. He was destroyed. Now he's talking to me, who's been bankrupt twice, lost all your money, got fired the day I was going to close on a house. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happened to me, and you're crying over losing this job. Now for me, at that time, I was kind of like, are you kidding? But for him, based on his karmic journey and experience, that was the end of the world. So we have to understand that just because my journey has been different or more difficult or whatever I want to call it, challenging or more obstacles or more things to break through, it doesn't diminish what somebody else is going through because they did not have that journey. So for that person who loses a job after all these years of never having one problem, that's the end of the world. For me, it was like, that's almost comical. But I had to understand, for you, that's critical. So for us, we had that tendency to judge people and say, oh, that's no big deal. But for them, it's a big deal. So it's bad for us to be in that judgmental phase because really what it comes down to is that person's really having a hard time. So that's their journey. So your journey is your journey, their journey is their journey. So if you have a journey where you have a lot of emotional obstacles, then you have more karma, then you came here to go through work and elevate yourself to a higher, you're at a higher level of energy than they are. So it doesn't make you better or them worse, it's just different. So the first thing you have to do is embrace your journey, which nobody does, because everybody's pissed. Is everybody pissed about their journey? Why this happened to me? Oh, look at it. Why is this happening? Look, oh, I can't get a break. You know, all that. And believe me, I was the king of all this. That's all I did my whole life was complain and feel like I was getting a bad break. So, which I was getting because that was the end show. So I was like, I'm getting a bad break. But anyway, so then I started to say, okay, if I'm going to do this work, I can't go forward unless I'm in acceptance of this is what it's about. I have to deal with whatever these obstacles are. I need to deal with this stuff because this is what I am here to do. So here's what ends up happening. You have two options in every circumstance. So I have these karmic issues that I'm going to deal with. So one of my big ones is abandonment. My father died when I was young. He also abandoned me prior to that because he was never home. My mother abandoned me emotionally when I was born, also abandoned me as a child after my father died. Core karmic issue for me. So I have to deal with that. Now I can feel bad about it, I can be upset about it, I can complain about it, but that's my core karmic issue that I have to go through. And I'm still working on it, because it's my core karmic issue. So you're going to have certain issues that you will clear very quickly. They'll come in, they'll come out. You'll say, oh, I got it, I know what it is, I felt that feeling, I see what's going on, boom, done. Those are your lighter ones. Your core ones, which are your lower chakra areas, these are the deeper karmic ones. These are going to be more difficult and they will have more layers. So you've got to look at it and say, what is this thing that I keep hitting my head against over and over again? It's like, boom, oh. And even when you get through part of it, you're like, here it is again. I got through part of it, but now it's back. Or I got through a little piece of it, but here's another piece. And I got through another piece, and here's another piece. Because that's your core stuff. Yeah, Meadow.
I guess I just don't, could you explain what the example of a lower core issue would be?
Would be abandonment.
Abandonment, okay.
Would be intense unworthiness. Would be intense shame. These core feelings that really, these feelings that really bring us into the deepest parts of who we are that stop us from going forward. They're usually going to be anchored in those feelings of shame and unworthiness, really are core. Because when you're not receiving, you feel shame and unworthiness. If you're not receiving what you want, right? You're not creating what you want, then obviously you don't feel worthy of having it or creating it.
Okay, so how do they relate to the lower chakra?
So your chakras, because they develop from the bottom up, your core's issues are going to be in your base, right? Your base, your solar plexus, they're going to be down your sacral, and your solar plexus, they're going to be down these lower three. Also, the moon center, which is here, which is the one I learned from my teacher, which is the one that's right in this area, is also critical for your responsibility. So that's the chakra here, right? So if I feel very responsible for everybody else, then that's a big issue for me in the moon center, because I need to deal with that feeling. Because if I'm feeling super responsible for everybody else, it doesn't let me do what I have to do.